Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast. I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And we will be talking to you today about people
the
wanting
thing.
to simplify things to basically rack up completion of things, like to give themselves chivos. That's kind of where we're headed today.
Yes, the achievement award seekers for read. Okay, let's
Give us a little background.
I'm not even going to bother with the background. I'm just going to drop us into the middle of it. I was looking at memes on Twitter.
Sure.
And it was a picture that showed the cover of The Great Gatsby, and someone said it was basically saying that we need to do this more often with books, and it was the left side and the right side. One was a sentence, the left was the sentence from the book, and the right was the simplified version of that sentence. And the person was making the case, we need to make these, we need to shorten books like this and make them easier to read for people.
Uh-huh. I mean, I guess you could...
Wrong.
I guess you could make the argument that there may be a market for such a thing.
You could, but that's the problem I have with this, is why would you not just write... If you want a short, simplified baby talk book...
Maybe you
Write
should.
the book.
Well, okay, so abridged versions of things are pretty common.
Yeah,
so
they
maybe
are.
you should give
But
me a little
abridged
bit more
versions-
detail about how bad what this person was asking for was.
Yeah, okay, it was exactly this bad. Do you remember the first paragraph from that story we read, that Lovecraft story, where it was the guy talking about being lost in a cave, talking about how he had gotten there?
Yeah.
And, it was just like a whole paragraph of just sentence and words and
motivation. And
motivation, all this description.
Yeah.
The essential point of the paragraph, I summed up in that recording and said, I was lost in a cave.
Yeah. This guy
If
wants
you wrote...
people to turn that into I was lost in a cave.
Yeah, he that's what he wants. He wants to take the great writing, the great thinking that people do when they come up with these extraordinary paragraphs that really draw you into a story and turn it into, I was lost in a cave.
So,
now
who is
that
this
alone...
Person? Who is this person, and
that
can
is
we find
lots
them
of
and stop
people.
them?
We can't, because I suspect that this is one of those normie things where normies pretend... Not even pretend, like normal people read stuff. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, and there's also no, okay, so, look, it's not about how many books you read per week or how many books you read per month even necessarily. You don't need to, necessarily rack up a large number. I guess I can understand in some kind of abstract way that there would be some people who, in what happens to people when they become too terminally online, become obsessed with saying, I read one book every week, or I read 2 books every week, or I read 1 book a day, or something like that. I mean, I can understand that, but it sounds like a pathology to me.
It is. It's a weird... It's the reader equivalent of, hey, how many flight hostesses did you bag this week? It's this weird, like there's this cult of reading almost, where people attach some weird prestige to being a reader. It's just another thing that people do. It doesn't have any magical spiritual essence. I think we talked about this once before.
We did talk about this, but But I guess you'd agree that reading books makes you into a better person. That's sarcasm.
Yeah, well, I mean, ask yourself this, though. If reading books did actually make you into a better person, but everyone took the shortcut method, did they actually become a better person? And furthermore,
I would argue
that
cutting out all of the things that make reading interesting... Okay, so, like, I definitely read some simplified versions of books when I was a kid. Like, there was a really nice little, like, abridged and simplified version of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne and Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. And I read both of those several times as a kid because, well, Dickens is pretty bad. Last time I tried to read Dickens was 10, 15 years ago, and I still was like, this is ridiculous. But, like, Jules Verne is good at this point for me, but, like, I don't need a simplified version. I probably didn't need a simplified version of Jules Verne then either, but it was what my parents got me. So, I read it over and over again. And so I can understand, like, producing these things for the purposes of children. But, like, for a grown adult to be demanding that we take the beautiful prose of Lovecraft and simplify it to something even less dignified than a Cliff's Notes is somewhat abhorrent to me.
Okay, so here's the thing. People don't understand what variety is sometimes.
Well,
if you want to write the 5-paragraph version of The Great Gatsby, go nuts. You can do that. And then you can give it to people and tell them, here, read this. This is the short version of The Great Gatsby. There you go. Now you've read it. There's no fun. You don't get anything out of it if you take an original work and say, I read the 5-sentence version, I'm good to go. And then it's like, why would you... Like, what significance do you attach? What significance does a person attach to walking around saying, oh, yeah, I've read The Great Gatsby, and they really just, like, listen to someone tell them the 5 points from the story?
Well, we had this issue with audiobooks, right? Only worse now. This is
way worse.
Worse.
There's no real problem with listening to an audiobook of The Great Gatsby and saying, I know the story.
Yeah.
Because you know the story. You heard the book. You just wouldn't say, I mean, you can, but you can totally say that you read it if you want, but
so what happens if you say, I read the abridged version of The Great Gatsby?
Well, it's like you said, you brought up that there are abridged versions. This is something that already exists.
Right.
But the point is, I'm just going to say it in the simplest terms I can. I'm going to give you the abridged version of my point. Yeah. This is an idiot saying, dumb everything down for me so I can say I read it too and look like I'm not an idiot.
Oh, I see where you're...
This is what it comes across as to me.
Yeah.
And it's not just with these... Well, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking, like, is it idiocy or is it this, shortened attention span problem that we're dealing with these days?
Well, we're going to get to that because there's another thing that I'm going to bring up in a minute. But just on this premise, you and I both went to school with people who we would largely categorize as uninterested in any sort of intellectual pursuit whatsoever.
Yes, we went to public schools in America.
Yes, we did go to public schools in America. So exactly what I just said. And you and I both know, as you pointed out well, no, as you have in the past pointed out, not necessarily on this
not today
recording. Yeah. But you would be the one that would raise your hand and ask a question, and we quickly learned that even the teachers had no intellectual curiosity.
Yes.
And since you're the only one sitting in a room that would raise your hand and ask a question, you knew that everyone else around you didn't have that intellectual curiosity.
Well, people asked questions, but they were like, what parts of this are going to be on the test?
Yeah, exactly. Or how am I even going to use this in life? Why do we need to learn this? Or can we have a free day tomorrow?
We want to do more crossword puzzles.
I remember being in 7th grade. We're talking middle school, and people were more interested in, hey, tomorrow can we just, like, what was that stupid game where everyone sat on their desk and tossed the ball around instead of doing any actual learning?
I never had this game.
Well, they did it a lot in my middle school. Seventh grade, we're well out of elementary school, and people would want to like sit on their desks and toss a ball back and forth and pretend that they were learning by. Someone would ask a question from the textbook and throw it to someone, and then they would have to answer. And nobody knew the material anyway, so it was just people throwing a ball back and forth.
Well, I mean, I could see that working if it was done right, but it sounds like it wasn't done right.
Well, it wasn't ever done with the stuff that we were actually learning in the class, in my case, so I have a particular hatred of that.
What was it done for?
It was like, oh, we're gonna discuss something that's totally unrelated to it. We're like in a science class, and it's like, let's toss the ball around and talk about trivia from like movie stars and things. And so we weren't. It was like that's one thing that's like, okay, well, I mean, I don't know any of that because I actually pay attention in class. This is why I didn't do good in school. Just a heads up.
And this is why I did do good in school.
Yeah, well, I specifically was just like, I don't understand why I need to do any of this. Okay, let's save that story. Let's save that story for another time. Let's just get back to the point I was trying to make. Imagine you're us in our classrooms already just completely giving up on everyone else around us, just like, yeah, these people aren't here to learn. Yeah. And I'm not being taught anything. And then all the people around you start telling the teacher that they need to change all the books in the library so that they're not intellectually stimulating so that they can read them too. And it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, take that away from me too. Why not? Let's do that. Sure.
Well, I mean, you know, the hope would be that the original versions would still be left available, but you know, I see what you're saying.
In a public school?
No, not in a public school, but I mean like on Amazon.
That's the thing. The original versions in this case, they're not asking to get rid of them. They're just asking for a version that is suited to their tastes, which it's no longer that book if you change it that much. Like, we're not talking just an abridged version where, oh, we wanted to do a smaller print run, so we had to cut out this part and this part. And we're talking about changing
we're talking about ripping the living soul out of a book.
Yes, that is actually the best way to put it. And and you know, there's just this point at which you want to pick people up and shake them and be like, just sit down and try to understand the more complicated thing just once in your life.
But that takes a long time. Can we put some Minecraft parkour behind it? Can we do that?
No, we can't. Because I did it. I was able to sit down and pick up these books and be like, well, I'm going to read it. Oh, I don't know all these words, but that's okay. I'm going to read it anyway. Maybe I'll look some up here and there.
So it's important to note that the first thought anyone has, any reasonable person has when looking at a hard book is, I'm stupid, but I think I can read this. And the very important point is that by doing this enough times, you become not stupid.
Yeah, this is this
right?
might be the part
that's the process of learning, right?
Yeah.
If in order to do this, now you simply dumb down everything so that you don't pull anything out of it other than a vague perception of what the plot was, then, well, you're not getting anything out of that. It's not the thing anymore. It's a different thing. It's like reading the Cliff's Notes for a novel. Why would you do that? The journey is the fun part.
Yeah. Furthermore, attaching some kind of significance to the act of being a reader.
I mean, I can understand that. People do things like that with everything.
Yes, but it's
dumb.
It's not gonna make you a better person, especially. Okay, so like you said, reading can potentially make you a better person. You can learn better things. You can learn more about the world. You can learn how to do things that no one else can do. Sure, fine, all of that. But just the act of reading, like, fiction in itself and having a broad range of fiction isn't really anything that most people can't do. Anyone that really wants to be a reader can be a reader. And
yeah,
it's a really weird kind of reader that wants all of the books to be changed into some like TikTok version of reading that, and you're right. You know,
the sad part is that TikTok is really popular.
Yes, it is. And Well, okay. Let's actually think about this, though. You're right. There's a lot of significance that people attach to these things. Like, people think it's significant if you're a TikTok creator or a YouTube creator. They might think it's
hold on. I mean,
significant.
people thought it was significant if you were a Vine creator back in the day.
Which actually took more talent and skill than creating on TikTok.
It may or may not, depending on your content.
Technical. No, like, you had to understand computers a little better than you had to for TikTok.
Maybe. But I'm referring to the length of a Vine, which would be 6 seconds. It's not even long enough to tell a proper joke.
Yeah, so it's one thing to sit there and say, oh yeah, it's kind of special that you're this creator or that creator, or that you wrote a book. Do we really look at the people that watch TikTok all day and say that's like prestigious? Because there's not much difference between watching TikTok all day and reading books all day, with the exception that, just by chance and chance alone at this point, we're still getting better material out of books than we are out of TikTok.
Generally,
and
yes.
You're trying to ruin that. You're trying to ruin that. So there's just that's just my strong feeling on how silly that is. Like, there's no problem with someone sitting down and writing something that is easy to digest for the masses and isn't going to prompt you to do any dictionary searching or anything like that. My God, we live in a world where you can buy a Kindle, tap the word, and it'll give you a dictionary definition. Come on, people.
That's a very good point, actually, yeah.
But, like, hypothetically, in this age where everyone's reading attention span is that of a Twitter post, we were just doing a show a couple weeks ago about Grimm's fairy tales, some of which are literally 3 sentences long.
Yeah.
This already exists. You don't have to boil everything down to nonsense. You don't have to rip the soul out of every book to have this.
The other problem is that certain books have like an allegorical content to them, where shortening and simplifying them this way basically forces you to concretize the allegory, which allegories usually suffer from that.
Yeah, like, if we lived in a dystopian world where I was forced to distill everything I said,
imagine Lord of the Rings. Imagine Lord of the Rings condensed this way. Power corrupts and can be difficult to throw away. Also hobbits.
Well, I imagine that the layman version of this book distillation would be you would boil all the words down into really basic sentences, and then the following sentence you would really quick explain what the allegory had been before it was destroyed.
I guess. I mean, that would be horrifying, but yes, that's probably... Wow. Yeah, that's bad. That's really bad.
Yeah, it doesn't stop there.
Is it the same or a different problem from the infamous modern English version of Shakespeare's plays book that we once saw?
It's a different problem, because this is actually people calling for the verbiage to be toned down so that they don't have to think as they read.
Is that a different problem?
Yes, it is, because okay, so funny story.
Like,
Rudy
any person can look up what prithee means.
Yes, they can. They won't, but they can. Rudy and I were once at a Borders, and we came across the most hilarious title we had ever seen for Shakespeare anywhere. It was titled The Modern English Version of Shakespeare.
Yes.
Or was it just Shakespeare?
It may have been like Hamlet or Macbeth or something like that. It may have been like one particular play.
Yeah, and we saw this, and it's like, but that was written in modern English.
Yeah, it was written in modern English.
And so what that book probably was, did you look at it? I didn't pick it up and look at it.
I mean, I think it had like side-by-side versions of like it in early modern English versus modern English. And, it was like the left page was the original and the right page was the part for people that didn't want to understand how English used to sound and look.
Or have no ability to discern things from context.
Well, again, these are all things that you can look up if you don't understand it too. Like it's not just, the context is not the only way through which we can understand Shakespeare. Like there are books that contain information about how, English sounded and looked and read in the, 1500s, 1600s.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to say that I'm completely cynical here. I'm just saying that if you had come to 10-year-old me and said that they're going to make books one day where you can tap a word and it'll give you the dictionary definition, I probably still would have said, yeah, but nobody's going to do that.
That's possible.
So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that by that time I was already disillusioned by my fellow man.
You know, it's funny. I don't actually own a Kindle. I think I've used a Kindle that was somebody else's for a little while once, and I already remember having done that.
Yes, well, I mean, there's lots of words that I still don't know.
Sure. Or words
and
that
I
have multiple definitions where I would miss one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I have a pretty big vocabulary. You probably more so because you've got a huge scientific vocabulary.
Jargon doesn't really count, honestly. Like, it's just, they're words that are only used in specific technical aspects, and so you don't really count them as vocabulary. It's workhorse words that count as vocabulary, really.
And I mean, I used to be a kid that would read the dictionary front to back, and it was just like, okay, I mean, I'm not going to retain most of that, obviously, so it doesn't really matter.
No, but every time you go through it, you'll say, hey, this is something that I didn't know that I kind of find interesting.
Yeah, there's usually like one or two things when you go through something new that you really remember because it's the thing that jumps out at you the most. So
Sure.
I definitely picked up some words that way, but like so that's the difference. Like, I was reading the dictionary as a kid because I thought it was fun and I was learning the occasional new word. I think that most people, if they had read the dictionary, like, especially the people that are like, why couldn't this only be 20 words? I think most people would just enjoy telling others that they had read the dictionary for this reading prestige thing that I keep bringing up.
I guess.
Like there's not really... There's not anything...
that's a fairly natural thing to do as a kid, though, is to, I can kind of understand a kid doing something for the grown-up points of it or something like that. I can understand that.
Yeah, psychology. As a kid, maybe, but like...
as an adult, though, it's not laudable.
Yeah, as an adult, the fact that I read the dictionary as a child and don't really remember a ton of the content.
Well, that would be the obvious
dictionary.
That would be the obvious statement. Like if you walked up to me smugly and was like, I read the dictionary a couple of times when I was a kid, I'd be like, well, how much of it did you retain? And you'd be like, all of it? And I'd be like,
no, it's like, what does retain mean?
How much of it did I what?
Yeah, so I do kind of get that impression as I pay attention to the reading verse on Twitter, that a lot of people are just they just want to be able to say, I read The Great Gatsby and I read Of Mice and Men. Like these are two books that I've never read because they sounded boring to me for a start. So
I mean, I read Of Mice and Men in high school because it was part of our English class, but yeah, it's not like
I'm not impressed by people who read classic works, if that's...
Well, I mean, if someone actually, there's a difference between reading classic works and like...
If someone can discuss the classic works with me?
Yeah.
Then I'm impressed.
Or if they can, like, bring it out in an apropos time, like if they're like, oh, it's funny, this kind of reminds me of book X that, where this happens. And, the lesson in that book is blah, 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 blah. And therefore, maybe we should take that to heed, or maybe we shouldn't. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's probably not what we're looking at here.
It's the achievements. So I see this a lot in people where they're like, well, like, they're playing like an old game and they're like, oh, we got an achievement. And it's like, well, those old games were like designed to generally not interface with internet-based achievement systems. And so, like, I was playing Metal Slug with someone with a friend of mine earlier today, and it was like he was like, hey, I got an achievement for throwing 50 grenades. I'm like, they were really scraping the bottom of the barrel for the achievements for this one, huh?
I guess that's just kind of the world that we've bred with the internet.
We're systematically reducing people's attention spans by feeding them faster and more frantic media at all times. Like,
we're getting them to crave it. We are getting them to absolutely...
It's not just that we're getting them to crave it. We're shunting people into this direction. Whereas it would be way better to, like, throw a copy of a good book at somebody or something like that. But, like, the thing is that everybody needs to multitask these days, right? Everybody's got, like, 20 different things they're working on. And like even people who genuinely are doing their best, they find that they have very little free time, and their free time is separated into smaller and smaller blocks, right? So, like,
Right.
this is kind of a side effect of this societal effect in how work is now working, right? The gig economy is a good example of this, right? You work for 20 minutes and you take a 10-minute break because you're waiting for your next gig. Then you get your next gig and you work for 20 minutes. You pick up a thing and you drive it to somebody's house and drop it off, and now you got to wait for somebody else. And sometimes you get, continual gigs, right? But that doesn't give you more free time. It just means that, once you eventually get free time, you're trying to keep it as short as possible, right? So it's very hard to read a novel piecemeal in 3-minute slots when you're also supposed to be looking for someone who needs you to bring them Burger King. So there's also services like, we both listen to, like, the usual libertarian podcasts on occasions. So
yeah,
like I think people will be aware, or I think we're both aware of Blinkist, right?
Yes, I've never used them though.
I've never used them either, but, like, supposedly what they do is they take a book, like a real book, and they condense it. They produce a condensed version that is approximately 15 minutes long, read. So that would be 2,500 words approximately. Take a 120,000 word book and summarize it down to 2,500 words. And the question is how much of what's in that book, because there's another problem too, right? There's the problem of people making books, especially nonfiction books, fluffy, right?
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of repeated or, irrelevant content in the book. And so, like, from what I've heard, there are a lot of books where you can cut it down to 2,500 words, and that's at least a representative sample of what that book might be that might help you understand whether you want to read the whole thing or whether you think you've got enough out of it from the 15 minutes that you can move on to the next one. But I've never used it, so I don't know how effective that actually is. Like I wonder if someone who actually had read the book quizzed someone who just heard the 2,500 words, or just read the 2,500 word summary. I wonder how much detail they're getting out of that. And I suspect the answer is that they're missing a lot of it. Just to give you an example, I'm currently working on a project where I'm going through Murray Rothbard's book, America's Great Depression. And I'm doing a study guide, basically, a summary/study guide. And I have summarized 2 chapters of 14 or 15 in the book. I'm about 40 pages in. And I already have, I think, 5-ish pages of notes plus a few lines. And I mean dense, full sheets of paper notes. So, like, that's already 2,500 words, and I'm 2 chapters in. And I'm cutting it down quite a bit. I'm getting the main points only. And I'm, glossing over things that don't really matter. But, like, if I tried to cut my entire summary for the whole book to 2,500 words, you would miss most of the details. You would not understand. I wouldn't be. I mean, if I tried to pack an explanation of Austrian business cycle theory into 2,500 words, that would be the 2,500 words. We wouldn't get to the Great Depression, right?
Right.
Well, I could get through the theory and I could get through some Keynesian objections to the theory, but that would be it, because that's where I'm at now. I don't know. It's one of those things where, unfortunately, we just don't live in the Matrix world where you can plug your brain into thing and get the information from it and retain it and apply it. You just need, like, it actually takes time to do this. It takes time and it takes attention. And attention's the most, ironically, attention is the most valuable thing right now, because the whole internet world runs on attention. And it's just that it all runs on 5 to 15 second blocks of attention, and not 30 to 45 minute blocks of attention. It's a really interesting dilemma, or maybe not dilemma, but problem, because there's definitely more than two ways to go in this problem, and there's definitely more than 2 sides. So Interesting.
Well, I mean, you brought up a good point with just bringing up a service like Blinkist. So there's already a service that does what these people are asking. However, there's also, you brought up a good point. You've got books that have a lot of information. You wouldn't be able. I mean, I've read that book that you're looking at, and
America's Great Depression.
Yes, and I know for a fact that there's so much in it that there's no way you could boil that down to 2,500 words. The whole point of that book is to make a case that the way the information about what happened during the Depression has been presented to us wrongly, and it has therefore caused a lot of really bad policy decisions in modern times.
Yeah.
So there are, from what I understand, a lot of the books on Blinkist are self-help books that can be easily condensed down into a lot fewer words.
Yeah.
But there's a different issue there. First off, that's not fiction.
I would even say that some self-help books can and some cannot too. Like, you can definitely make a self-help book that has more than 2,500 words worth of useful advice in it. It just seems that making self-help books seems to be a way for people to flower their way through a book and produce something that can easily be condensed to 2,500 words if you just cut out all the flowers, you know?
It depends, because the point that I was going to bring up next is that there are ways that the human brain learns that need to be taken into account here. So let's say you boil something down to 2,500 words. I mean, I have on my shelf a kanji dictionary for Japanese characters that it's got about 2,500 symbols in it.
Yeah.
I've got a little over half of them memorized. I don't know them all. I've read through it. I've looked at them all several times. How do I actually learn the kanji? I don't learn it by picking up the 2,500 kanji book and looking at each individual one and memorizing them. I learn them by using them in context with other things so that I understand their relation in sentences and paragraphs and how how the meanings of the symbols relate to everything. The same can be said for a way that you would learn things in a book that can be distilled down to 2,500 words. You have a book that's, actually like 60,000 words, and you've distilled it down to that. But a lot of what helps you retain the information is the road you travel from 0 to 60,000 words, the stories that are told in the book, the way the information is presented. There's a lot of math. I mean, this is actually the problem with Common Core. I didn't want to bring this up, but the problem that we have with Common Core is one of how students retain things, and the reason that it looks like an insane thing to everyone, which it is. It's completely backwards. A backwards method of teaching people mathematics. So you, growing up, you learned how to do math the traditional way, and as you learned it, in your head, when you had to do problems, you would do little tricks, like, okay, well, I'll just change this number to an even number, and I'll add 1 to this number, and then I'll add them together, because I can picture the even numbers added together a little more clearly than the odd ones. Like, adding a 5 and a 7 isn't as easy in your head as adding a 10 and a 2. So, you do these little tricks. That is what Common Core is. It's you're taking these boxes and moving this number here and this number, and you're using the tens place here, and you're looking at these numbers as variations of themselves. If you teach that part first, and you haven't taught people to take the numbers and say you have X number of objects adding to Y number of objects to get Z number of objects, and students don't understand that basic part, having the tricks that the really smart and clever people use all the time, it doesn't help them.
They won't know when to apply them.
Which is why none of them understand what's going on, which is why none of the parents can help, because they're looking at this like maybe they learned different tricks in their head. Everyone's going to have different tricks.
Yeah.
But that's how this was written. This was written by a bunch of people who knew mathematics and knew all the tricks that they used in their head and sat down and said, well, let's teach them these tricks because it works so well for me.
Well, yeah.
And you didn't take the road from the 0 to the 60,000 words in this instance to get there. You took the 2,500 word version.
It's not even the right 2,500 words point, though, in Common Core's case.
Yeah, well, it's a whole mess.
One of the things that's worth understanding there is that you have to even in arithmetic, you have to learn to walk before you can run. You have to understand, like, let me see if I can.
Yeah, and Common Core is trying to teach kids to do backflips before they've even learned to walk.
Right. Well, it's like there's those 2 + 2 = 5 people who are like, but if you 2.4 plus 2.4 is 4.8, and that 2 approximately 2 plus but that is an incorrect way to do approximation, right? You don't approximate certain things before and then certain things after. You that's not the way that works, right? If you have, it depends. You have to figure out which digits are significant, and you have to understand what your relative error are. But those are all much more complicated mathematical procedures, right? To calculate the relative error of the sum of two rational numbers, or decimal, rational numbers expressed in decimal form with known uncertainties is not the same thing. Is a much harder thing to do than simply adding the numbers together and saying what the answer is. Because in order to do the error estimation, you have to use square roots and powers of 2, and even in some cases you might have to do partial derivatives if you're doing something in a functional form. Like in physics, on my way towards my PhD in physics, the stuff that we learned in the books was still new mathematics for us. Like, here's tensors, and here's what a pseudovector is, and here's a certain here's the type of differential equation that Bessel functions solve, and here's a Fourier transform, and it was important to learn all those basic ideas, but at the same time, the tricks became even more complex and even nonsensical in certain ways. The tricks that you use to solve a spherically symmetric electrostatic problem are infinitely more complicated than simple rounding. And if you do things in the wrong order, you're going to get the wrong answer too. So you have to understand the problem before you can understand the tricks, and then once you understand the tricks, maybe you can solve the problem, assuming it has an analytical solution. And then they started throwing problems that didn't have analytical solutions at times. So you'd have to go to a computer and type in the problem and make sure it was right. And then, you put it in and it would say, I can't do this. And you'd be like, okay, why can't the computer do this problem? Oh, there's a pole here at, x = 0. We're going to need to exclude that pole. And so you change the form of the integral. You do this, you do that, you do the other. You go into the complex plane and you have a bunch of two I pi's floating around. It's the tricks are important, but the tricks don't mean anything if you don't have if you don't have a really good grasp on the underlying concepts that you're actually trying to deal with.
Yeah, you won't know how to manipulate the tricks to put them to work.
Well, you won't understand when they're supposed to be used, and you won't understand the problem to begin with, right? Like if I give you a differential equations problem, which is solved by doing a Fourier transform, it doesn't help for me to just say, oh yeah, do a Fourier transform. You have to know what a Fourier transform is, and then once you're like, okay, so step 1 of solving this problem is to do a Fourier transform. Then you have to figure out, okay, what tricks. Not approximations, but what simplifications can I make to this thing in the Fourier domain because of its shape, because of the shape of what I'm working with. Basically, it's one of those things where you could have an entire homework problem that depends on you knowing a trick, and if you don't know the trick, well, God help you.
Yeah, and it comes to that whole feeling of prestige. Like you brought up the 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure. If you leave out all the relevant information, you can say that and smugly stick your hands on your hips and go, ha. But the important part is
it's more. It's even simpler than that. If I write down 2.4 plus 2.4 = 4.8, the question to ask is the 0.4 significant in the 2? And you would need to know the extent of your measurement, the error, the uncertainty in your measurement in order to make that judgment. And if you make that judgment and the 0.4s aren't significant, only then can you add the two 2.4s and get 4.8 and say, I have under the assumption that my errors are uniform and aren't biased in any particular direction. I can make this thing. That's all way more complicated than simple arithmetic. And the point I'm trying to make is that it requires a much better understanding of basic arithmetic to do, and therefore introducing it to someone who doesn't have those arithmetic chops at that point is just going to confuse them. That's why you start with whole numbers before you go into decimals, before you go into fractions, before you go into negative numbers, before you go into imaginary numbers, before you go into an imaginary, complex plane, before you go into, algebra. You need to build these things up, and simply assuming all the tricks and it is kind of like, it makes it look like a magic trick, which is exactly the opposite, perspective that you want an engineer to have.
Yeah, it's okay, so you've kind of coming at it from the other way.
Yeah.
It's a fault on the person that thinks that this is the right way to approach it. The person that tells someone 2 + 2 = 5, and I can show that, doesn't give them the information they need to understand that what you're really trying to say is rounding 2.4 down to 2 and adding two 2.4s together will give you the 4.8 rounded up to 5. That's what you're really trying to convey by saying 2 + 2 = 5 here, but you've left out all the critical information. And so you end up just looking like an idiot who doesn't know how to add.
Well, I mean, these people, you say that, but these people have, prestigious positions at American universities. And what they're really trying to do, in my opinion, is further screw up the American education system to give themselves and their cronies more work. But, that's beside the point.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'll agree with you on that point. But yeah, I guess if, we definitely have to do we have it planned at some point. We're going to do a recording about your, how physics has affected your writing.
Yeah.
It's very useful to have a PhD in physics hanging around.
Well, kind of, sort of. It can be. I have a lot of specialized knowledge.
Put it like this. It's very useful to have one hanging around when you feel like talking about cool physics stuff.
Fair.
Because that was probably, what you just said just now was probably the most interesting part of this, to be honest, so far.
I don't know. It probably will. I fear people will tune out, but I hope not.
I mean, look, I'm not a complete idiot when it comes to math. I don't know very advanced math. Like, the furthest I would be able to get and everything you just said is I've heard of a Fourier transform, and I have done complex number graphing for engine analysis or motor analysis.
Yeah.
But putting all that aside, and as we often do, jumping back to the point we were originally making. I mean, this really all did connect, though. It's kind of, the point is, why are we trying to dumb all of this stuff down? Why won't you just read The Great Gatsby?
Dumbing it down removes the value of the achievement.
Yeah, there's that too. It's with the 50 grenade example. Oh, hooray, you pressed a button 50 times that did a thing that we knew it was going to do in a game where you're going to do it regularly. Right. Thanks. Here's your trophy. There's nothing wrong with someone sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to write a bunch of 5-paragraph stories. I mean, this isn't exactly something that can't be done on the spot. The book's
good exercise, even, I would say.
Yeah. This might be a good writing exercise.
But you're not going to get the complex characters and plots in a 5-paragraph story that you are in, a 90-page Lovecraft novella.
Yeah, and it's not like this hasn't been done in other ways. I mean, we brought up Terry Brooks before. The original Sword of Shannara book was basically the 3 Lord of the Rings books condensed down into his one novel, the whole story told at once. And then he made it into an entirely new series that was largely not related to that anymore.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. So this has been done, and in that instance, it was done in a very clever way. Like, why boil down the original thing that people read and know and probably love? I mean, there's a lot of bad writing out there that I guess people might want to do this with too, but someone took a great known work and made a condensed version of it and made it their own thing. And there's no problem with that. And there's not even any problem if you really want to sit down and take every single paragraph in Lord of the Rings and convert like every paragraph down to one sentence and then send it to your friends and let them have a jolly good laugh and tell everyone.
Do you remember the site Rinkworks?
Yes, I do.
They had a feature where they would ultra condense movies down. I forget exactly what they called it, but you would bring down take an epic large movie and condense it down to 2 sentences, or like one line from one character, kind of snappily edited to make it funnier. And that kind of thing is good for humor, but I read those and I wouldn't say that I've seen the movies that they represent. It's humor. It's shortening for the sense of humor, for the purpose of humor, but that's a totally different thing from shortening for the purpose of condensing, summarizing, in quote unquote good faith to convey the ideas of a work in a shorter period. Those are 2 different things.
Yeah, and that's the thing that kind of bothers me about it is just like, I mean, it doesn't really bother me. If you're going to be an idiot, but I don't understand why you would want to condense The Great Gatsby down to like half its size and then tell everyone you read The Great Gatsby. I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand where that comes from. I feel like I understand it in the sense that maybe someone just really wants to be able to tell people they read The Great Gatsby, but they only have half the time to read it that they would normally have.
Yeah.
But you haven't really read it. And I know what you're talking about with the humorous condensations. That's actually a really good reason to do exactly that. My favorite one is probably, I think it was The Fountainhead, the movie The Fountainhead in 5 seconds. And it was just 2 lines pulled from the movie. You'll never be an architect. And then the next line is, I am an architect. The end.
Yeah.
So this can definitely be done to humorous effect, and more power to you if you do that. But my God, just read short stories. There's short stories out there. Read flash fiction. This is a huge thing on the internet. You can go. Yeah. There are tons of flash fiction, flan fiction.
Flan fiction.
Do you like flan? We've got 1,000 recipes for you.
1,000 recipes for flan.
But yeah, there's tons of flash fiction websites. Yuck it up. Enjoy it. There's probably some really good stuff out there.
Yeah.
People do those tell a story about this picture in 6-word things on Twitter all the time. I always try to come up with the most ridiculous thing I can if I actually engage.
Sure.
I do engage people on Twitter once in a while. It's a fault of mine, I know.
Yeah.
But there is another aspect to this that I haven't brought up yet. And it was just today, actually. I dabble in the VTubers. I watch the VTubers. One of them I watch is a guy who does like pop culture news called Rev Says Des.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about a video. He brought up a video that he had watched where some guy was talking about visual novels and how they're too long and they need to be shorter. Now I guess this guy must not have experienced the $2 Steam visual novel at all, because I've got several that are like half an hour long and were largely disappointing because they were only half an hour long.
Right.
But I believe the example he came up with in the video was like Doki Doki Literature Club, which I guess is a 6-hour read, which, I mean, is about the length of reading that I have for maybe like a 500 to 700 page novel. If you read a book fast, you can generally read a 700-page novel. At least if you read like me, you can read a 700-page novel in maybe 2 to 3 hours, maybe even 1 hour if you're like insane about it. But you're not going to enjoy it unless you read it at an even pace.
Well, the issue with visual novels in particular is that they're basically, especially slowly narrated books in most cases, right? Like because the people in the book, the people doing the voice work, for instance, are trying to be dramatic. It's generally read at a slower rate than an equivalent audiobook would be read, and you don't just have like paragraphs and paragraphs of description. There's a much larger focus on dialogue, and there's usually a lot of it, which also slows things down, because now you have 4 words I have to click, 3 more words I have to click. This is just an ellipsis, and now I have to click.
You actually got to the point I wanted to get to, like, way quicker than I was going to.
Well,
whole
that's
point of
kind
me
of
bringing
what
up...
I do here.
Well, yes, it's true. As a physicist, you know how to dumb things down. Wait.
That doesn't follow.
I excessively complicate things. It's part of my job. We need 26 more dimensions in here, guys. Let's go.
To be fair, it's 7. And and every good physicist thinks string theory is bullshit.
Thank you. I was going to say it's not 7 if we get to string theory.
No, string theory is 11, so that'd be 4 plus 7.
Yeah. But yeah, the point I was making with reading quickly is that you can read a book quickly. Yeah. I often find that when I try to do that, it's not as enjoyable because even though I'm still like giving the characters voices in my head and everything, it's like watching a video at 2 times speed. It's just not the same experience. And so I will take the 6 hours it takes to read a long novel. And that's a pretty big book. 6 hours is a big book. So saying that 6 hours for a visual novel is too long, first off, take into account how much longer it reads it because of all the slowdown you just mentioned. Take into account the fact that, well, I mean, you can turn all of that off. You can turn the voices off. You can have you can have it auto skip, or you can click really. There's usually a button that will just instantly display all the text and then go to the next text when you press it again.
Yeah.
So you can make it move faster, and you can read it at a faster speed, which is perfectly normal to do, or perfectly fine to do. In my case, I would rather sit through, if it's one that has voices, I would sit through a lot of...
If it's a good one that has voices.
Yeah, because I'll turn the voices off if I don't like them, and then I'll just read
right.
it, because it's a visual novel. You have that option. So you can customize that experience and whittle it down to, 3 or 4 hours of playtime, as opposed to, sitting there and going through each thing. And like certain ones, I would want to get the full experience. I want to hear the voices. I want to see how the characters react. I want to take time to look at some of the images to like you get a lot of images where someone will have a scared face that you hadn't seen before. And it's like, oh, that's a good image for this particular scene, and make all those fun associations in your head to enjoy the memory later.
Right.
But it's called a visual novel, for starters. You should have been expecting something like a book to begin with.
It's not a book. It's different from a book.
It is. It's different from a book.
Because, and those distinct ways, whether fortunately or unfortunately, make consuming it slower than just reading a book. It's like I'm trying to think of a good similar, like a good analogy, but unfortunately the one that I thought of was not a good analogy. So no, I mean they're designed to be, it's okay. Maybe I have a good analogy. It's designed to be savored.
Yeah, and you have to ask yourself,
consumed rapidly.
Yes, yeah, and the question you have to ask yourself is, if this is the complaint you have about it, maybe you don't like visual novels. Why? Go ahead and keep playing them if you want. But
by the way, that's a perfectly valid position to have.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't like to sit there and just... a lot of
people don't like the aesthetic of visual novels to begin with. Most of them are,
most of them are anime or manga.
Derivative anime stuff that a lot of people just don't like the aesthetics of, and that's perfectly fine. And if if you don't like a particular visual novel, even if you like most visual novels, that's also fine, right? Like, there are visual novels that have topics that you might not enjoy. And there are even, if there's... So I guess the hard part is to know how long a visual novel is, but even that's been solved, because
Steam
you
will
can
tell
go to
you
something
the
like the Visual Novel
time.
Database, and you can look at the approximate length of the visual novel, and they'll tell you, is it short? Is it 10,000 words? Is it long? Is it over 100,000 words? They'll let you know, and you can research these things trivially before you purchase one.
You don't even have to go that far. Steam has a little square on the corner that says people have usually finished this game in this amount of time.
Yeah, but I don't trust those for the most part.
Well, I mean, for a visual novel, I wouldn't, because I'm pretty sure that if I'm skipping the text, I'm probably reading it faster than the average. But, there's a lot of things that need to be brought up here. Like, if you actually enjoy visual novels and your complaint is that they're too long, they have a built-in bookmark feature for starters. I mean, I don't sit down these days. When I was in high school, I would read almost a book a day in like one sitting every time. I don't sit down and read my books in one sitting anymore because I got things to do. So I put a bookmark in it.
You got that TikTok account that you're working on.
Yeah, and my OnlyFans. Don't forget my OnlyFans.
I would prefer to forget your OnlyFans.
You're never getting those images out of your head.
No, I'm not.
Thanks
All
for the donation,
bleach in
by
the
the
world
way.
won't do it. What was that?
Thanks for the donation, by the way. But I put a bookmark in the book. I set the book down. I come back to it later. I do that with visual novels. I didn't get through all of Umineko in one sitting. I didn't get through a single chapter of Umineko in one sitting. It is an incredibly long visual novel. I didn't even get through what was that really short one? The moon one, the economics one.
Oh, World End Economica.
Yes, World End Economica. I did not get through any individual part of that in one sitting. And you save the game, you come back to it when you've got more time. Unless you don't like it, then you just don't come back to it. Right. But I don't understand how a 6-hour game, if you actually enjoy visual novels and 6 hours is too long, my question is, why do we have all these 40-hour games that aren't visual novels? And it's like you can't even bookmark them whenever you want to in a lot of cases, although you pretty much can save a game, put it down, and come back to it anytime. There's no way to get through a 40-hour game in one sitting unless you've figured out some kind of speedrun mechanic. You have to save
you
it,
can
put
do
it down.
It just requires a rather inhuman dedication toward it.
Well, yes, but there's not too many people that want to do it, is my point. And so
people are weird. There's a significant group of people that have these ridiculously long play sessions. I've only done that in small occasions, but like I think my longest consecutive play session is 17 hours for one game, start to finish.
I don't think I've ever hit half of that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's not common.
Back in the Halo 2 days, I might have played for 10 hours straight online with my brother at some point.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing. That's not going through a game. That's just that's playing multiple different
multiple competitive rounds. I don't think I'll ever be able to do like a 10-hour stream thing. But I'm watching this guy that Rev is talking about in his video. And this guy is making a video about how these are too long. And I got the impression from the way he was talking about it and the stuff that was in the background of his video that he talked a lot about all sorts of different games. So obviously he's probably played a couple of these games that are 40 hours that you play for a couple hours at a time, put it down, come back to it, and finish it up over time.
Yeah.
Why is that so much
more egregious?
Why is it so much more egregious? If you can't. This is why I don't think he actually likes visual novels. If you can't do 2 3-hour sessions or 6 1-hour sessions and get through a 6-hour visual novel, then how are you getting through a 40-hour game in several hour sessions at a time? Unless you like one and you don't like the other. Yeah, I mean, because I play both. I play long games and I play long visual novels, and
you play short games.
Yeah, and I'll admit I probably at this point like visual novels better than a lot of the 40-hour games because I finished more visual novels. But that's exactly what I mean. The actions speak louder than the words.
Right.
And like you said, there are short games out there. You don't need to play the really long visual novel. As I mentioned, there are short visual novels already. You just want the condensed version of the really good ones, it sounds like.
Imagine a person who looks at a 100% run of Steins Gate. It's like, we need to get this down to 2 hours. It's like, no.
Yeah, oh my God.
No, you don't do that.
That would be the America's Great Depression version of that would be like the 2,500 word version of America's Great Depression in visual novel form, because there's just too much you need to know for Steins Gate to make sense. God, could you imagine trying? I mean, you might be able to just tell everyone the mystery. I'm
horrified by the prospect.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And a visual novel, as I mentioned, you can bookmark it at any time. Like any screen you're on, they will let you save that game. I haven't found one yet.
Usually, yeah.
Like the only place I think you can't save a visual novel is when they give you one of the like animated video intro
movie
things.
Or,
yeah. And then you're like 1 second away from a save anyway. You know, you can always turn it off, and you're usually like right at that video anyway, unless you haven't saved in the past hour.
Well,
and
I mean,
some of them autosave.
The videos are usually no more than 90 seconds, and you can get through them with escape if you really feel like it. So
yeah, it's just really weird that this is even an issue. Why would you? Why? It exists. The short stuff exists. If you don't like the long stuff, don't ruin it for everyone else. Because, I mean, the visual novel community, I guess, came down on this guy for this. They were like, no,
I would imagine so, yeah.
It's one of the last mediums where they're still kind of doing it right.
Right.
I mean, it'll get saturated at some point to where you'll look for visual novels and there'll just be a ton of crap, and they'll get to the point where it gets hard to discern what's crap and what isn't. Right now it's pretty easy to. Like when you search for visual novels and you come across furry fantasy land, you pretty much know that, you know, it's okay, I'm probably just going to skip over this one. And then you can look at the pictures a lot of times and be like, this one doesn't look like it's got much to it. And that's another thing, actually. This person could just look at like the really basically animated ones, because a lot of times those ones, the effort in the drawings tends to reflect the length of the story. It's like someone just wanted to tell a quick story, and so they put a little artwork together, put something out there.
As an investment, if you're only going to see the picture 4 times, right, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to spend $1,000 on it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Let me go off on a little bit of a even further off tangent, though, because like,
okay,
I find this a lot in like people who, I wouldn't say review, but people who like produce, like spit out opinions on, say, video games, where they really hate a particular creator or a particular genre, and every time a game from that particular creator or from that particular genre comes out, they find it. They I mean, I guess I can understand that it's an attention grab game, but like, it's very silly for you to say, "Oh man, another game from Quantic Dream. I bet it's a an overblown movie." And it's like, yes, of course it is. That's what they produce.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Heavy Rain, more like heavy not gameplay. And it's like, yeah,
it's what he makes. That's
the question is, were you surprised by this? And if the answer is yes, then I would say you probably
God help your
read
children.
some books. What's that?
Then God help your children.
God help your children. Yeah, that'll work.
Well, I mean, I remember the classic example of this. It's there was that game magazine. The same issue of it had the original Etrian Odyssey game.
Yeah.
And a Pokemon game. And the Etrian Odyssey game they were both reviewed by the same person.
Right.
And the Etrian Odyssey game had a low score. And the reasoning was, this is just another, like, gain experience, gather items. This is just like another
fest, blah, blah, blah.
A grind fest and item gathering game. And then that same reviewer in that same magazine gave a Pokemon game a high score.
Right.
Which is the exact same type of game.
But it's not in the first-person perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, if anything, you could say there wasn't even that much story substance to the original Etrian, and there's more story substance to the original Etrian than to any Pokemon game I'm aware of.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, I mean, that I remember that day I remember that so clearly. Like, we were looking at that magazine and laughing, and then we noticed that it was the same reviewer for both of those. It was just like, oh my god.
Well, it's like, I mean, I guess this is a thing that magazines have to do, is that they're like, all right, Jim, you're on, this game duty today. And he's like, but I don't like those games. And like, well, you're going to write a review anyway. He's like, oh, god dang it. I mean, it'd be like asking me to review a Dark Souls game.
Or me. I'm not too big on those either.
Yeah.
I like certain types of really hard games, but the Dark Souls ones just kind of bored me. It's like, all right, well, I'm 3 hours in, and I'm not very good at this, and I'm still trying. You know what? I just really don't feel like learning it, to be honest. I'll go play.
I definitely have I have that same issue, basically. There's definitely a level of frustration at which, if you go above that level of frustration, I no longer want to play the game. And, yeah.
I think my biggest problem with the original Dark Souls was that when I failed, I was doing the same thing over and over again. I wasn't like... And I know this is silly to say because I used to play like 2D games like Castlevania and whatnot all the time, and that was you died, you got better at it, and you went at it again.
Yeah.
But the Dark Souls games, being in 3D and having the control scheme they had, they deliberately kind of make it just that much more difficult to where you no longer feel that you missed that jump because you're not good at getting that jump yet. You feel like you missed what you were doing because the controller itself isn't arranged the right way, or the way your character moves is like, oh, I mean, if I had hit it properly there, but I'm not 100% sure where these weapons line up in their swing.
Right. Well, so apparently the first and third Dark Souls games are both really good about that, and the second one is really bad about that. But, again, that would require another... I mean, the way that I picked the first Dark Souls game to play was I was like, which one is the easiest one? And they said, oh, try the second one. And I was like, okay, I'll try the second one. And I put a bunch of time into it. I think I have 70 hours in it. And, like, I thought I was at the end of it, and then they're like, nope, there's more. And I'm like, oh, cool. And then I kind of forgot to play it for a couple of weeks. And then I couldn't play it anymore because I was at, like, this very difficult area, and I had lost muscle memory for doing things. And so I was like, cool.
Yeah, that's a thing too. Like, I stopped playing a lot of games just because the controls get so complicated that I can't pick them up if I don't play them for 2 weeks.
Well, there's also a risk, like a return on investment thing, because I will sit down and play more Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance on some of the harder difficulty levels because that game is ridiculously hilarious and fun. But man.
Oh, with Dark Souls too, it's like I kind of thought when I picked it up that there were going to be more RPG elements to it, and there was going to be a bit more variety in the items I was using, and I just didn't feel like any of them were exciting and varied enough to make me want to know what else I could do. Well,
it was one of those things where everything's in really short supply.
Yeah.
That was my problem, is that I always felt like, I shouldn't use anything, but, we're getting way too far afield at this point.
Well, I mean, we could always just abridge this down and leave this entire part out, and then maybe make the first part 10 minutes. We can.
Yeah, that would work. That would work out perfectly, I'm sure. No nuance would be lost.
Hang on. This is all we need. We're just going to have a 5-second episode. It's just going to be this. Hey guys, Wordy Pair here. We probably shouldn't make The Great Gatsby into a 5-word book. Peace out.
See y'all later. Have a good week. Well, any other thoughts before we close this one up?
Actually, I was wondering if we should just end it on that note.
I mean, that's the thing, is that we kind of like petered out on the actual topic, and then we were like, well, here's a tangent, here's a tangent, here's a tangent.
All right, so
I don't know if you had any other things that you wanted to discuss on this, on the actual topic.
We did bring up the case to be made for, okay, so people that don't want to think want to read this book as well. It's like, all right, go write your own version of it, or,
Well, that's even harder.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's true. So, like, just read things that are already condensed, or get the Cliff Notes for it. There's Cliff Notes for The Great Gatsby, I'm sure.
I'm certain that exists.
Yeah, go read spoilers on there's definitely like 1,000 people that have written something about, have written the spoilers for The Great Gatsby.
It could be as simple as writing Great Gatsby plot synopsis in an internet search, and then clicking on the top link that isn't an ad.
And then if you really, really want to, just tell people you read it, and if they decide to quiz you on it, which I don't understand why they would, but if they decide to, just feed them a few points from the synopsis, and then call yourself a reader. Amen, brother. There you go. You got what you wanted. I don't know how it's serving you in any other way. I really don't get it. Follow me on this. Don't get it either. Yeah. Follow me on this. Set aside 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And read a couple of pages from The Great Gatsby every day. Just 15 minutes a day.
So funny that you should mention that, but a lot of books happen to be, especially longer books, happen to be separated into things called chapters. And you could almost like sit down and do one chapter of a book per day for many books, because generally speaking, the author has an interest in making the chapters of readable length because they're all on one topic or one series of events. There's that too. You might have to stop in the middle of a chapter sometimes until you develop an attention span, but
Yeah, no, I'm looking it up
Then
right now.
Just
I don't
fold the corner of the page over, and you can
return it to your public library. People love that.
Yeah.
Did you ever? Oh, I remember seeing a picture once where a guy read every page and folded the corner of every page, and so when he closed the book, it was like twice as thick at the top. No, I'm looking it up right now. Great Gatsby. How many chapters?
Sure.
I've never read it, so I don't even know if the book is broken up into chapters. It has 9 chapters. Okay, so how many pages?
How many pages? How many words is The Great Gatsby?
And Wikipedia does not... Oh, wait, hang on. Here we go. No, it doesn't say how many pages.
Great Gatsby by the numbers.
How many words is Great Gatsby?
Now classic 1925 novel is his publisher
47,000. It's only 47,094 words.
What?
Divided by 9.
No,
God.
hold on. It's only 47,000 words?
Yes. And someone wants
That's
to
not even a novel.
Yeah, that's like a novella.
That's a long novella.
That's not even Doki Doki Literature Club. Oh my God. What? I don't know. I mean, I know Twitter is what, like 200 some words is like the upper limit for a post if you're not giving money to Elon Musk.
280 characters.
280 characters. So, like maybe like let's say 60 words.
Sure.
So 60 words, and just think about how many posts you read on Twitter each day. Not you,
hopefully
but
none.
Like the person
none.
The person that posted that picture.
But hold on. Hopefully none, but I'm going to let you go on with the analogy, assuming that the number is not 0.
Yeah, well, we're going to make an assumption that you're probably reading at least 10 posts on Twitter. There's people that do the doom scrolling all day, and they probably read like half a novel's worth of things on Twitter by the end of it. But let's say 10 posts, just 10 posts, 60 words apiece, 600 words. It won't take you long to get through The Great Gatsby.
No, I mean at 43,000. So I found another thing that said it's 43,500 words based on page count. It's a 174-page book, in like a small novel form factor. I might
chapters.
go read The Great. I could probably read The Great Gatsby tonight if I felt like it.
Yeah, 9 chapters, about 5,000 words per chapter. You're looking at here.
Oh, and it's probably in the public domain too.
Yeah, so you're looking at, if you read 600 words a day of The Great Gatsby, it's only going to take you like 8 days to get to read a chapter.
Yeah.
8 times 9, there you go. That's how long it's going to take you.
Right.
8 times 9, of course, is 3 years for those of you who are still not putting on your thinking caps. What?
Yeah,
nothing from the physicist?
What's that?
I was really thinking you were going to question my math there.
I could have if I was listening, but I was looking for a free copy of The Great Gatsby and found one.
Because I promise you, someone, at least one person out there, was just like, oh yeah, 9 chapters, and 9 times 8. Yeah, that's probably going to take me about 3 years. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on how often you decide to sit down and pick it up, I guess. But
Well, no, we're shooting for a solid limit here. Just read 600 words a day. You'll get through it in 72 days.
Yeah. I would recommend reading more than 600 words a day, but,
I mean, we're talking about people that want to condense a 43 potentially 1,000 word book.
I thought it was long. Like I thought it was a long book, and that's why people are like, oh, I read The Great Gatsby, but apparently not. Apparently it's just that I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to read it. And so we'll have our next episode on The Great Gatsby.
Yeah. Let's put this into perspective. Dracula is 161,774 words according to this rough estimation.
Yeah. Dracula's a chunker,
and it's a fantastic novel, and I actually recommend that. I've seen bits of The Great Gatsby movie, and I didn't think I would like the book based on that, but I might read the book one day. I just never cared about it because it was one they wanted me to read. It's free and short.
Why not?
They didn't want me to read Dracula in school. They wanted me to read The Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's kind of how I make my decisions a lot of times. But
That's
now
fair.
I think I'm going to have to read it now just to be like, it was nothing. It didn't even have hard words in it.
It's under 50,000 words. It technically wouldn't count today as a novel.
Yeah.
Just think about that. It doesn't count as a novel.
It's too long. We need to take the classics and make them have God, I really wish I could. I should have saved that image just so I could tell you the exact wording of it. It was not pretty. It was very annoying.
Well, I've seen. Yeah. Well,
you've seen stupid on the internet,
right?
All right. Well, those are my thoughts on it.
And my thoughts.
If you think we're being unfair, calling you an idiot because you want the watered down
2,500 word version of The Great Gatsby.
Yes. Then I apologize in advance, and here is your bouncy shiny ball. Go fetch.
Here is a ball. Perhaps you would like to bounce it.
You don't really want to read The Great Gatsby.
I kind of do now.
No, not you. The person that put that image up. That's you don't actually want to read it. That's your problem.
Well, that is the problem, right? Okay, so this is one of those other things that's an issue, right? Is people like, gosh, I don't want to get into a tangent.
It's like a guy with raw meat on a hamburger bun walking around the street, like walking up to people and just be like, "Can you cook this?" Just like hunched over and like waddling towards people, just like breathing through his mouth. "Can you cook this for me? Cook my hamburger."
It's like, no, you've already soaked the bun in salmonella. It's not. It's a lost cause.
Yeah, it's. Oh, what a world.
Oh, what a world indeed.
Good God, don't let these people get a hold of Wizard of Oz.
I haven't read The Wizard of Oz because I hated the movie.
No, these people want a condensed version of The Great Gatsby. Can you imagine them with, like, made-up creatures?
Oh, yeah. Well, they wouldn't even show up in the book. They wouldn't have time.
Yeah, they'd have to remove them. Oh, these things don't actually exist. Remove them from the book. So that's not how fiction... Okay.
Well, the best part about this is that you can since they lack all natural curiosity, you can hand them garbage and they might not know the difference.
We're doing this wrong. We just need to sell people absolute garbage. I'm going to change my writership from writing what I feel is decent fiction, science fiction, fantasy. I'm just going to write 2,500 word blurbs and see if the masses get what.
The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is even shorter.
Yeah, they're very short books. There's just lots of them, but they have a lot of like made up fiction-y characters in them, like weird creature. Characters.
But it's 19,000 words.
Yeah,
and the description I'm reading is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is a children's novel written by L. Frank Baum and illustrated by W. Denslow. I guess children's novel, but like I don't know.
I say. Back when children's novels actually had stuff like, I don't know, the Tin Man massacring wolves.
Yeah.
Good times. Kids had it so much better
indeed.
Back then. Now they won't even tell you what real math is.
That's right.
Fetch the ball. Fetch the ball.
Fetch the ball. Now shake.
Is that our ending line?
Hold on, actually. No, give me a second here.
It's tangent hour.
It is tangent hour. No.
Bear with us, folks. The next 3 hours of this is... Yes, 3 hours of this is going to be just us looking at things on the internet.
The Harry Potter average word count is about 153,000 words. Let's see. There was some... Why did I hate these sites. Oh my god. So what the site said when I clicked on it was like, The Wizard of Oz is only... Some combination of the Wizard of Oz books contains 42,636 words. At the same time, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra has 430,269 words. Wow.
Holy cow, that's that big.
It's a huge... Yeah,
I need to
almost
read that.
every version you're going to find is an abridged version. Because it is a chonker.
Honest to God, my whole life I thought Don Quixote was going to be like some 60,000 word novel. And
yeah, right? It is not.
And now I'm just wondering how far the character went in a book that size.
Well,
so now I have to read it.
It's funny because I spent some time on archive.org looking for a copy of it, and I kept finding abridged copies of it. And I was like, why are all these copies abridged? And when I finally found the non-abridged copy, I was like, oh.
That's actually I'm going to bump that one up on my reading list because I've always been meaning to read that one, and now I just have to know how did you get enough material for. I don't know. Maybe it's just not good. We'll see. We'll see.
I mean, it's a classic. I don't know whether that is meaningful, but it was a classic 200 years ago, so it's probably meaningful.
It's
just
a lot
don't
easier.
tilt too hard at that windmill.
Yeah, it was a lot easier to be a classic when people weren't publishing 100,000 books a day.
I guess that's true. All right. I guess we'll call this an episode, as tangent-filled as it was.
I think they were some good tangents. We had good times.
They were good tangents.
And a couple people played with the bouncy ball over in the corner. Everything
Good
worked
for
out.
them. Yeah, absolutely. Everything worked out. Everything worked out perfectly. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. This has been the Wordy Pair Podcast, talking about the strange desire to abridge books so that you can get more book chivos.
No. It's not a desire to abridge books. It's a desire to decontextualize and rip the soul out of books.
Rip the living souls out of books for your own personal convenience and book chivos.
It's just like every description of driving in the book is car went down road.
I mean, you could do that.
No, honestly, I think I might rewrite The Great Gatsby with idiot speak.
Ooh, like the 1,000 simplest words in the English language version of The Great Gatsby.
If I don't know when that book was written. If it's public domain, I'm rewriting the
1925.
whole book.
It's public domain. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna rewrite the whole book, and I'm just gonna put it up on wherever I can publish it, and see if people actually buy the idiot version of Great Gatsby. Put your money where your mouth is, people. Telling me I have a fan base here.
You could do what they did with like Pride and Prejudice. You could make it like the Great Gatsby. Fights the Titan.
Oh yeah, Pride and Prejudice and vampires. I love that.
And zombies.
Or no, wait, no. There was a movie that was.
It was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Yes, that was it. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Both of those were. The one was a great book. I think the Lincoln one might have also been a book, but they were both pretty good movies too.
That's interesting because I heard really bad things about the Lincoln movie.
Well, I mean, it made Lincoln into a hero, which he was not. Right. So, we're off to a bad start. But even
setting that aside, my understanding was that the movie was awful.
Oh, no, there were things about it that I found genuinely entertaining, like... oh,
really?
That whole thing about the government stealing the silver was... They made that the reason, like they were using it to fight vampires.
Oh.
So the silver being taken from people during the Civil War was, it was recontextualized into Abraham Lincoln needed them for the War Department. Tools. Yeah.
I see. Interesting. Well, that was your bonus tangent, everybody. And now we're going to stop this episode before we end up in another one.
For real this time.
For real. See y'all later.
Ooh, bouncy ball.
Ooh, my favorite.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja_Mouse_Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.